and gentlemen, this is your cruise director, Tyler. Hope you're out there enjoying another beautiful day on board as we sail these high seas. If you've ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes of a cruise, it's time for you to pull up a stool, grab a drink, and buckle in, because you're about to hear stories that no other guests have heard before. Welcome to the Crew Bar in an episode of Ship-Faced, Confessions of a Drunken Cruise Director and Friends. Let's sail away. Good morning, Casey. How are we doing over there?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. This is a cruise director who I have heard of, but we never crossed paths working on a line. Where are you coming from? Where do you live at?
I live in Tampa. I'm at home right now, just in between contracts right now.
Right on. I want to dive right in with time with you because I know I have a lot of stories to pull from your experiences. How long have you been a cruise director?
I have been a cruise director since 2006, so it's been almost 2 decades now.
Wow. The iPhone came out when?
2007. And
Okay.
I know that because it was a trivia question of mine.
I was just going to say, I was going to talk some trivia. One of the questions I want to ask you, like, what is the most, when I say, what's your favorite trivia question? Go.
Oh my God. That's a tough one. They were always questions that warranted, fucked up answers or made the crowd look at each other like, did he really just ask that? I think what medical condition kept William Blount from traveling to Philadelphia on a horse in 1776?
And someone knew the answer.
They do, because they all start giggling and, they catch on quickly. There's a lot of them. I love searching for trivia questions that are not so much, trivia as they are jokes that end up being something that the crowd can,
the answer is syphilis.
Conversation piece. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
That one was actually hemorrhoids was the answer for the William Blount. Yeah,
that'll wreck a horse ride.
Yeah.
So yeah, cruise directors do a lot of trivia, and so we become masters of this. Like, we know this much about thousands of topics, and it's kind of fun to know this. So you started out in a time when there was no real, like iPhone changed everything. And I'm sure so many ships changed their digital platform and the ways that they did onboard communications and what you're able to do in ports and stuff like that. What was it like in that time frame? Did you have a ship phone or?
I did. In fact, I had a ship phone for, I rarely did I use my iPhone for really anything up until, the last like 5 or 6 years, because it was so new that a lot of people still didn't have it when I started as cruise director I actually started in 2000. Sorry, I started in 2008. I said 6, but it was 8 when I was promoted. I joined the cruise industry in 2006 and then 2008 cruise director.
Okay.
So I really wasn't using the iPhone, really just sat on the bedside, and it was the ship phone that I was using the majority of the time.
So you started in 2006 with ships. What was the position you started in?
So that was, they actually called it assistant cruise director, but that's kind of misleading. We were really cruise staff. There was an assistant cruise director. There were 4 of us. And then there was a senior assistant cruise director and then cruise director. So we were the runts, as I like to refer to it, just to explain to people, we did the grunt work, the basketball shootout, the trivias, the, hosting karaoke, that kind of thing. And then as you climbed up the ladder, your audiences grew, senior assistant cruise director / DJ, your responsibility was to be the DJ at night, which was a laugh because you're not a real DJ on a cruise line. You're a wedding DJ from 11:30 to midnight, and then you go home and you're done. But, hosting bingos and things like that. But yeah, started out as cruise staff. And then I was right place, right time. I had wonderful, wonderful teachers and mentors to bring me along. And the climb up the ladder was pretty quick.
Great.
2008, 24-year-old cruise director. And it was, the trouble began.
Yeah. So that is pretty young to be a cruise director. Because the age range, I think I know like 60-year-old cruise directors who do those world cruises. And
oh, yeah.
So the age range really varies, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually really early on in my career, I had to fill in. There was another cruise director who, unfortunately, their mother passed away, and he must have been 50, 55-ish, somewhere in that area. And he was on one of those ships, one of those world cruise ships, one of the really small ones that they have their set guests that go on that ship all the time. They love the ship. They know the ship. They love the cruise director. They don't want anyone else but that cruise director. And that cruise director had to leave. And then 24-year-old has to fill in. And I was hated. They hated me on that one. They literally put in the comments, throw him overboard. We don't want this.
Wow.
He's a child. So I gave him my best shot.
so starting out there, I think that's what a lot of people don't recognize. For I think the majority of cruise lines, especially back in that day, the guest surveys were so crucial for a cruise director, for the hotel director, for the captain. It meant essentially those scores come in, my pay grade stays the same or improves, or I get to keep doing this, or I get better itinerary, keep corporate happy, keep captain happy, keep hotel director happy. You get to negotiate for a little pay bump because you were the voice and influence to get those scores out. But I forgot until you just said that, how often I would sit at that desk and read those comments unnecessarily.
Oh, you could spiral. Yeah, absolutely. They were so important. It's different from cruise line to cruise line, but I don't think the guests will ever know just how important those ratings and those comments were, the morale of the crew on board and their next step. Like you just said, I would definitely argue, way too important. And I think they were great, used as a tool to get us better and improve, but it got so intense and they mattered so much to the higher ups and ultimately the cruise director as well, included in that list, hotel director and captain, that the cruise directors got so good at basically tricking everybody into getting the guests to do what we wanted them to do. If you were a good cruise director, you could spend a lot of time and effort making sure that you said just the right thing to pull on the heartstrings and get the ratings you wanted. And it skewed what was actually happening on board, in my opinion, in a lot of cases.
Yeah. So I want to pull some examples from you. So what's some of the most god-awful comments you've read or heard that just I had to go take a breath?
Other than throw me overboard?
That's pretty awful. Throw his ass out to sea.
And I hadn't even done anything wrong, which was the tough part. That was, that fill-in actually went pretty well. He has a short man's complex. That was tough to read. That was,
wow.
And I'm not even, I'm
short.
Anyone that knows me will say, oh, he's a short guy, but I'm 5'9". I don't feel like that's too short. But anyway, Let me think. God, yeah, there's some wild ones in there. The ones that they're so bad that they just make you laugh because it has nothing to do with your ability or your job. Some people just don't like other people for no reason at all. And some of those bled into the comments a little bit, and it made for, you had to sit there with a glass of wine or a beer, and you couldn't take it to heart. You just had to laugh it off.
It's the equivalent sometimes these days of where we are with social media. That
no doubt.
Post something, you do something, and you do your best not to dwell on ridiculous people who have no impact on your immediate life or circle of influence. But damn it, why did they have to say that? Because now all I can do is ruminate on the negativity. Now tell me though, of all those years, what are some words you read that just sank in your heart of damn right, I am exactly where I need to be?
Oh man, when someone makes a comment, you were born to do this job. When you do a cruise director, which by the way, I did not know or think that I was going to be a cruise director when I was in college. But when you get into something and you do have a passion for it and you try to perfect it, and then you get that return, if someone says, wow, I've seen a lot and he did an unbelievable job. He's better than anyone I've seen, which is a funny thing to say because everyone's got their own cruise director that they love. Everyone's got, oh, so-and-so is the best. No, so-and-so. Everyone has their, but when you see more than one of those, when you start to see them crop up, when you see the tallies and people year after year, as you get better, start to say, he was born to do that job. That's when I think, okay, I'm in the right place. Don't get a big head, but keep doing what you're doing because it's working and you're making people happy. I always try to remind myself, a lot of these people pull the pennies from under their couch to do this one time in their life.
Right.
And if I can make sure that I'm doing my best to make sure they're having a good time, then doing something right. But yeah, the comments you read, he's in the right position. That always felt the best.
What's the quick summary of when you tell people you're a cruise director? What does that mean? What is the position? What is the role? What is your job description?
it's the most fun job on the planet, in my opinion. It's an opportunity to make people happy. It's an opportunity to travel, and it's the best kept secret in regards to saving money. I mean, it's unbelievable. There's no expenses on board, or they're very minimal. But it set me up to do really well in life, because I feel like it's the best kept secret, because no one, I feel like very few people graduate from college or high school or whatever and think, I'm going to go work on the water. I'm going to go to sea. I feel like that's really rare. And I was so glad that I chose it, because it enabled me to, I got more of a degree from cruise lines than I ever did out of college, in my opinion. I learned so much about hospitality and entertainment. So I would say, what is a cruise director? Cruise director is, you know, an opportunity to make loads and loads of people happy while getting to travel and save money. That's how I explain it to my friends anyway, that don't get it.
Right on. It's a very fun, engaging role. It's a very entertaining type role. And yet it is a very important role, because you are the spokesperson between the nautical staff and crew to all of the guests, essentially. What is the situation in your years of experience where you're like, holy shit, I just saved the day, or that was a wild ride?
Yeah, you're right. The importance of the cruise director role when shit hits the fan. This is where you get your paycheck. This is where you can really make a lot of money. Ideally when everything's great day to day, there's a lot of people that could do the job. But when you miss ports, or when there's deaths on board, or when people are getting helicoptered off, or when we hit nasty weather, the reason the cruise director is so important is because they have to try to be positive in a negative situation. Their wording, every single word in every sentence has to count, has to mean something. They have to get on stage and calm everybody down, silver lining, positivity, and ensure that their money is not going to be wasted going forward, and that there's still an opportunity to have an awesome time. And depending on the severity of the situation, that's a tall order to try to get a group of 2,000 to say, hey, you know what? Cruise director so-and-so is right. This is going to be okay.
What's one that you still have nightmares about?
I'm trying to think of because spanning almost 2 decades, there's a lot, unfortunately. I'm trying to think of one of the more troubling ones. The first one that sprang to mind when you asked the question is, we unfortunately had have a horrific accident on board around 2011-ish, something like that. And he got they had just boarded the ship, a new cast, and he got his foot caught in one of the gears on the stage, and it took off a few toes, and it was just gruesome. There was blood everywhere, and we were just off the coast of Mexico. We had to get him to a hospital, and we did. He's great and everything. He's fine. But to try to explain that not only are we diverting and we're ruining the itinerary, and we're going to miss ports, and we're going to shave off time of your vacation, but we have to cancel 3 nights of entertainment because we can't put on the stage what we had planned. And that was one of the worst ones, because he was a friend.
Right.
And, a lot of times something will happen on board, and the cruise director is basically just the news reporter. But this was different because it was he was a friend, and it was part of the entertainment department, and it made it tougher. It was more personal. And for me to keep my composure, to get on stage and over the PA system and whatnot, and say, hey, this is the situation. Here are the effects. Here's the effects it's going to have. That was probably the toughest one, because it was a perfect storm.
Yeah. How were the guests in response to that?
They were, to say they were wonderful is an understatement. We brought them in on the situation because you have to. I mean, when you're taking somebody off for medical reasons, there's going to be loads of questions, and we let them in on what was happening. They were outpouring of letters and flowers that went to the Mexican hospital where our guy was, and follow-ups after the cruise. Is he going to be okay? Everyone, it brought out the human in everyone, and they not so much cared about, we got 3 hours less in Cabo. It was more, what an unbelievably terrible thing to happen to not only him, but his friends and family and the crew, and the guests couldn't have been better. I do remember that about that. Yeah.
It's great to hear, because I've had some experiences where it's just like, dear God, y'all, some of the things you're saying and the way you're acting, if this was your family member or you, we would be doing the same thing, missing our ports of call as we go back and chart the waters. Could continue to breathe and remember this is humanity, not. It's wild sometimes how people can miss that out there. And what a unique container when emergency strikes, because it's just different than an emergency on land.
It's very tough. Yeah, very tough. And thank God we were just off the coast of Mexico and not in the middle of the Atlantic, you know?
Yeah. Did you find a shift in how you felt when you moved into the cruise director position, with the way people looked at you, guests and crew alike, and what that did to your response to yourself in the mirror?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. It was because when I joined cruise ships, I thought to myself, because remember, I didn't know I wanted to be a cruise director. I hadn't thought about it. When I joined the cruise industry, I thought, I don't know what I want to do for a living. So I'm going to go on a cruise ship and travel and see some of the world and just take a break for myself while making a little bit of money. And then I'll start my life. Then I'll find out what I want to do for a living. And it didn't happen that way at all, obviously. So I got on board and I took the job pretty seriously because I wanted to keep the job, but I was a party animal. You know, I just came out of Florida State University. I was on board with an entertainment department from all over the world. It was a blast. You know, I was single at the time. It was mayhem. And then when I was promoted to cruise director, I left a contract in 2007 and I was looking for my next one. So I emailed my supervisor and said, "Hey, thank you for another great contract as assistant/DJ. What's up next?" And she said, "Do you have time for a phone call?" And I thought to myself, I'm either getting promoted or fired. It's one of the two. There's no reason. Everything was done email.
You went through a list of like, she knows about.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no reason for a phone call unless it's a shift. So luckily it was cruise director. She said, we have a fill. We have a position that's open for a 1-month trial as cruise director. Do you think you're up for it? And I literally said, "Are you sure you want to do this? I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't know if I have the foundation yet. I don't know if I'm going to." And she said to me, "You're going to be fine." She didn't even listen to what she said. "Stop worrying. You're going to do great." I come to learn later on that somebody had recommended me, and he said, "No matter what he says, you got to give this guy a shot." So thank you to him. But yes, to answer your initial question, yeah, I felt a shift because I went from being a moron to knowing that there's an entire vessel that's relying on me to make sure that at the very least the entertainment aspect of their cruise goes according to plan, top notch, and the whole nine. So when I was in that role, I did feel that there was more, there was a lot riding on this. More people were depending on me. Having said that, because of my age, I did also feel a lot of, I don't think he's capable because of how young he is. I felt that energy a lot in the early stages. It took a few years for that to go away, for me to really start to do everything the way I felt like, well, I got enough confidence now. I can really ride this. But in the early stages, yes, very nerve-wracking getting to be in that position at 24 years old. And I did feel like people treated me differently, but I also did, not as common, but I did feel some people didn't have the confidence in me at the early stage.
My experience, I got to watch the man, like, in action for a week of my training. A very respected cruise director that was on the line we were with was my trainer. And God, he just instilled such confidence in me. And with coming into that whole world with no experience on board, I'm just like, I've got to fill those shoes. Handsome as fuck, funny as all get out, like just winning on every corner that I seen him, with confidence oozing and command. And I'm just like, all I can do is try to mimic that. And like, it was wild trying to fill those shoes, and what I felt when I faked it until I could make it, in that confidence of like the response people gave to me. Of like, oh shit, here he comes. And man, when I would walk with power and confidence, like I know where I'm going. And if you don't, step aside.
Yeah.
Because this is just it was like a survival thing for me.
Yeah. Your trainer was the man, and he still is the man. I
Yes.
mean, you couldn't have been put with anybody better. That there's no doubt about it. And he's so good that it's kind of funny. You know, you wonder if you're doing somebody a disservice if you put them with him,
Right.
because if he weren't instilling the confidence in you, you would look at someone like him and think, I can't do that. There's no way I can be him. And that's just a testament to him. But I'm glad to hear that he instilled that confidence in you, which he's great at, by the way, too.
Wonderful.
I mean, he wants people to succeed, but I mean, talk about staring at a Goliath in the industry. When you're trying to get started, it's got to be like, whoa, you know.
And something that always floored me, even the time frame I came in, was his stories that he would tell me. I'm like, holy shit, you did? And he's like, yeah, man. He's like, there would be times I would come and I would just sink in like a hotel director's meeting, hungover as shit. And I could only sit against the wall to try not to vomit. I'm like, no way. And you got away with it because you're that good. It's like, yeah. And the stories about what happens in broom closets on the side of various bars and lounges. I'm like, what? Like being 24, what are you talking about when you're talking about some of the mayhem that you started in? Like, I don't think guests understand when you say mayhem out at sea with crew partying and drinking. What did that look like?
Yeah. So let's remember that, and I don't know what it is now, but when I started, a beer was $1 in the crew bar. A bottle of wine was $3 or $4. These are times where you put a bunch of young people, mainly single, and even if they weren't single, they sure as hell had a way of showing it.
They are
All
tonight.
into a confined space. Yeah. I mean, it was insane how accessible alcohol was, how cheap it was. I still can't believe that they did that because it was almost as if they were encouraging. And, you know, the cruise lines, especially back then, I don't know if it's capped it, but they were losing people left and right. Every contract, damn near every month, there was somebody else getting terminated. It was unbelievable. It was so much so that I thought to myself, all right, this is the Wild West, and I've got to make sure that I can at least keep my shit together so that I can keep this amazing job with all these beautiful people, these fun people, and these alcohol prices that are from another planet. I did have that one little bell in my head that said, okay, keep your shit together because you're going to want to do this for a long time when I got on board.
Right.
And that's what happened. I mean, it was, I had a fling, which, back then we thought we were going to get married. And it was the first time I ever fell in love. And she ended up cheating on me just no more than a year later. It was just a mess. And I developed a hard shell after that. That was contract number one. She cheated on me. I ended
was she a dancer?
Up with somebody, yeah. I found out.
Now, hey, I'm not saying anything about dancers, y'all. I'm just asking.
No, she happened to be. There were, I don't want to sound like a pig, but as a single guy on a cruise ship, I mean, it was quite the revolving door for, just short of 2 decades. Didn't really plan for it to be that way, but that's just the nature of the gig. Every contract is only 3 or 4 months long. So at the end of a contract, you both stare at each other and you're like, is this shit going to work? Or are we done here?
Yeah.
It kind of forces you to do that, which is kind of a blessing in some cases. But anyway, it was crazy. She cheated on me with a guy that I coincidentally was best friends with on that one contract that we were together. So then I ended, much like the broom closets you were talking about, I ended up hooking up with her friend right after I found out she cheated on me. And it was just this big mess.
Touché.
Yeah. Whew. So then after that, I thought, you know what, this is not a scene for long-term relationships, in my opinion, or not at this stage anyway. So I kind of made a vow to myself that I was going to just enjoy my 20s and not get involved in anything too serious. And that's exactly what I did. And after we parted ways, shortly after that, I was promoted to cruise director, and she tried to get back together with me. And I said, nah, that's not going to happen. So
no thanks.
Yeah. when I was promoted in 2008, we had an account that was unlimited. They didn't cap it at all. So if you were standing in a 5-foot radius of me in the nightclub, you drank for free.
Drinks left and right on that account. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hero.
Yeah. It was just, I mean, and the thing is too, everyone says if you work on a cruise ship, you're an alcoholic. Everyone on cruise ship is alcohol. It's not. I don't agree with that, but I also don't know how to argue my stance because it was more of a boredom thing. As a cruise director, you do actually have quite a bit of downtime in the evening. Yes, you introduce the shows and you might have a game show, but I just found myself with a pocket of 45 minutes and I thought, well, I'm just going to go get a glass of wine.
Yeah.
I don't have anything else to do. I can't go back to my cabin and kick my clothes off and watch an episode of this. I don't have time to do that.
Right.
The only thing I have time for is a drink or two.
Right.
So that would continue over the course of the night. And then, without even realizing it, and with your tolerance building up, you reach the end of the night. It was a 6 or 7 drink night, but that was nothing.
Right. I was talking with somebody else and it's just how like on board your insides change and your insides are just like, okay, we're doing this. This is how we're living right now. Okay. And it just gets like titanium inside to receive that amount of alcohol and still function fairly well.
Absolutely.
What's one of the... Oops, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, that every now and then that norovirus would crop up and I never got it. Not one time in 16, 17 years. And I thought, the only thing I can think of is that nothing can survive inside of me because it's just Cab, Jack Daniels, and Corona on a cycle.
Yeah. It's like that 109-year-old lady who's drank Dr. Pepper her entire life and smoked cigarettes. She's like, I don't know. Yeah. Doctors told me I wasn't supposed to drink this, but they're all dead.
Yeah, if it ain't broken.
So the ratio of your door, what's your total? How many people do you think came in and out of your cruise director cabin?
Oh my God, I can only guess. I mean, I would say the number's around, it's got to be around 45 or 50.
Legend says Casey, the cruise director, had.
That's a guess. And the one thing I really tried to stay away from, the thing that scared me was guests. I didn't tug at that because that's a job ending pile of shit you can get in if that goes south. So I had a couple buddies that found out the hard way. So it happens.
On board with you, they got fired?
Yeah, one of my, he was a cruise director when I was still coming up the ranks. We weren't cruise directors at the same time, but yeah, he was out on the back deck with the guests and was caught. And I don't think there were a plethora of cameras around back then. I'm sure there's way more today. They're just everywhere. But I guess he thought he could get away with it. Something happened. He got caught. But yeah, if it was a guest involved, it was an automatic, you're fired. That scared me enough to, be smart about it as much as I could. But and I did let it happen a couple times, but I made sure that it was airtight.
Yeah. And how do you preserve that? How do you go about Well,
the good news is when the situation arises, it's usually in the early morning so that there's nobody around to see the walk that when you lead them to your cabin. So that I had that going for me. The other thing I had going for me was my cabin was, when you left a guest hallway, my cabin was literally one door inside the corridor. So it was a nanosecond to get to my cabin from a guest area. So I had that going for me too.
You mentioned, the firings and people being kicked off and stuff like that. What's one of the most dramatic firings you were a part of or you witnessed?
Oh my God. There's this one I don't have to think about at all. So he was a good buddy at the time. Now, you know how you kind of drift apart as the years go with your ship buddies and acquaintances and whatnot. But I was cruise director and my DJ, so my assistant, basically, we called him DJ, but he had the assistant cruise director job. We were in the nightclub and he looked normal. I didn't think that he was struggling at all, but he was a big drinker too. And I turned to walk back to the bar and I heard somebody say, "Oh my God." And I looked back and he had fallen off of his stool. And he was perched at his little, DJ booth or whatever. And I went and helped him up, and I said, "Dude, are you okay? What's going on? You all right?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah, sorry, I'm fine. I've had a little bit to drink, but I'm going to stop." So, and he didn't stop. So he kept on going for the rest of his set, and then midnight rolled around, and he went to the crew bar. I was not around for this, but he kept going, and I get a call at 3 a.m., which is unheard of. I mean, usually everyone's got their shit together by that point, passed out. But I get a call from security at 3 a.m. that the DJ is in a fight in the crew corridor with his girlfriend at the time or something. They were yelling at each other. She tried to get him to go to bed. Every time he went to go to bed, another noise would wake him up, apparently, and he would come out of this. He went into this Hulk mode where he just went nuts. He was banging on everyone's door. And I found out that he had also been taking cold medicine with all the alcohol that he had in his system. So everything was amplified. He obviously, because security was involved, he had to go to medical to get a breathalyzer, as I think that's how it works on most cruise lines anyway. And obviously, what he blew was out of this world. It was a point 2 something, or I don't know what it was, but it was insane.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be able to function. So he ended up getting fired. The reason this one is so significant to me is because his mom was due to board the next day to take a cruise with her son. He had to tell his mom, "I'm so sorry. Not only am I not going to be on board for your cruise, but I have also lost my job." And I remember sitting in the captain's hearing, which we brought everybody in, the staff captain, hotel director, myself, and he was remorseful. He didn't fight it. He was an angel about it. He knew that he fucked up massively, and the captain said, "You have anything else you want to add?" And he said, "No, just make sure my mom has a good cruise." And I thought that was the saddest thing I've ever heard from an exiting crew member. And the hotel director said, "Hey, we'll do our best to make sure she has the cruise of a lifetime." But what a shitty situation. I can't think of, to get fired and have that tacked onto the end of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is so painful, and one I can relate to. My parents boarded the cruise that I got fired from. And so to come into the wake of my shame and frustration that I left with crews, like, oh, there's the parents of that guy who just, and hopefully by the time they boarded, they forgot. But like, gosh, if that was not the most painful phone call, so that phrase, "make sure my mom has a good cruise," was, And I laughed at the blood alcohol level, because when I got fired, I woke up having missed disembarkation announcements, like the call off that you get up at 6, 7 in the morning for when you return home. And I was still in bed, and I went and blew .2 around 11 o'clock from the night before. So, I mean, I was drunk. Yeah. Did you ever get caught for those blood alcohol tests?
No, I had a couple close calls. Two of the stories that I really am lucky that I wasn't fired. It only happened a couple times, but I had a couple close calls in my career. One of them was, I was at a crew party, and I don't even think I was really hammered. I was just kind of enjoying the crew party. I probably had a few, but for no other reason than I misstepped. It was at a pool, and I missed the step, and I fell down on my back, and I came, an inch from breaking my back. I was trying to walk down from a hot tub down to the main level, and I was fine, but I had enough to where I probably would have been fired, because like we were talking about earlier, your body just adapts. And even if, you could blow a .1, but you could feel like you were a .01, like the feeling you have.
Yeah.
And I felt fine, but if I had been taken down to medical, I probably would have been fired. And the staff captain was at the party, and he had the wherewithal to see what had happened. We were both very established to this point, also happened to be a great friend of mine. And he literally picked me up, much like a groom would a bride, taking her over a threshold, literally in his arms, cupped, walked me down to my cabin. And for, I shit you not, 1 month, and I'm not exaggerating this in the slightest, I couldn't do anything other than baby step my way around the ship. I'm talking 1 foot 1 inch, other foot 1 inch. I had to do offstage intros for a week. I got to the point where I could finally make my way on stage if I had to, but when you saw me, something was massively wrong, but I couldn't tell anybody what had happened. I
Right.
surely couldn't tell anybody that night because they would have said, you got to go down to medical. We got to
Right.
fill out a report. And
Yes.
then that would have been the end of me. So that was, I thank God the staff captain, who, by the way, in charge of all safety on board, did not take me to get tested. And I was able to keep that job.
The Alliance is just like a survivor out there. It's funny because I think even like a good relationship with the ship doctor, and you're like, hey, you know what I mean? It's
No doubt.
Because those come in at random sometimes. I recall I was on my way to host a game show or something, and I was like 2 gin and tonics in for sure, and like with everything else from the night before. And I got the call, like, go down to medical, you got a random test. And I'm like, oh, I can't right now, I've got a show. And I found someone else to host my show. I went and grabbed Gatorade, and I went to the gym, and I cranked Gatorade as I I did the damn elliptical for a solid 45 minutes because I knew I was going to be going home. And then I'm like, okay, I think I can be down there in an hour. Okay, they called me like 3 times, and I tried to step away from the treadmill or whatever I was doing in the gym. So
yeah,
good times.
I forgot about the random ones. Yeah, they did that every now and then. It was just a crapshoot. And a lot of people gambled because they thought, there's 800 crew members on board. They select 14.
Right.
I'll be fine. So I had a male dancer call me, or I called him rather. He was randomly selected, and I said, "Hey, buddy, you got a random drug test in an hour." And he said, oh, "Okay." And he hung up the phone. He called me back in 3 minutes and said, "Hey, I think I'm going to be able to make it for that." And I said, "What do you have?" And he's like, "Well, I'm planned on going to do this." And I said, "That's not how it works. Unfortunately, you got to do it. No questions asked." And he hung up the phone, and he called me back again, said, "Hey, listen, can I reschedule? Can I go on another day?" And I said, "Hey, I don't know what's going on here, but you got to come to do the drug test." And he hung up the phone. He came to the office, and he said, "Can we talk with no one in the room?" I was like,
there we go. There it is.
Where this is going. Yeah. So he said, and he was such an angel too, which made it even funnier. But he said, "I went out into Jamaica and I smoked weed 8 days ago." And I said, "Okay, have you smoked since then?" And he said, "No." I said, "Well, here's the deal, man. If you don't smoke constantly, you're a dancer. It's going to leave your body within a few days, and especially with the high level of activity that you have going on, the rehearsals, the amount of water you drink, you're probably fine." And I was right. He was fine. I said, "You don't have to worry about that." But every now and then I did have that. I called somebody from some musician or somebody else in my department, said, "You got a random drug test," and they said, "Sorry, I'm not going to be able to make it."
Yeah. Casey, what is one of the most wild nights you have ever had?
Oh, St. Petersburg, Russia would definitely be the answer. It was not a proud moment for me. And absinthe was involved, which was, that is a train that doesn't end. It was awful. So I was, I don't even know if they're going to Russia anymore with all the shit going on. I guess not. But yeah, it was St. Petersburg. It was probably 2014-ish, 2013, something like that. And I was with, and this always kills my parents, by the way, and my friends. I'm like, "Yeah, I went to St. Petersburg, Russia." Like, "Oh, did you go to the, this landmark and that?" And I'm like, "No, I went to a bar. No, I went to a bar.
Nope.
Got some good food." Because here's, in our defense, we don't have enough time to go do fun shit all the time. So it's always, if it's a 9 to 5 that we're in port, we only really have 11 to 3. So I didn't have time to go do anything fun. But we did have an overnight, and I missed the entire day. I was working, so I did get off at night. A couple friends went to a bar. They did the whole absinthe thing. They lit it on fire. After, I'm not even kidding, 2 or 3. And I remember most of the night is blackout for me, but I do remember that and I wish I could tell you why. I was crying to the cab driver on the way home. I don't even know why. I don't know what I was talking about. I was tearing up and I was sobbing, talking to the cab driver. I don't even think he was responding. I just think he was driving. He thought, "This is going to be over soon. I will get this American back to his ship." And
I
then
don't
get
speak
to go
English.
Home. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's embarrassing to say. Normally it would just be, "Oh, he's a talkative guy. He's talking too much because he's drunk." Nope. This was sobbing for reasons unknown. I have no idea. But yeah, that was a nasty night. I was an ugly American for that night. The absinthe was too much for me. And I'm usually a pretty calm guy. God, my friends will tell you I'm a calm guy if you know me. I'm a maniac if you know me really well, and you get me. The drinks are flowing. But that night that was beyond anything. I just it was a shit show. St. Petersburg, Russia was an absolute shit show, and I would give anything to talk to the cab driver today and get his take on the night when a 20 some odd American was sobbing to him on our way home.
What was the cruise director sobbing about in Russia?
Yeah.
Well, hilarious. Did you ever see any like outbreaks on board, fights or things that you had to break up because security's sketch sometimes? So like, do we even have security?
That what, that really didn't happen. I didn't see any fights, and I'm talking about crew or guests really either. I never saw that. Everyone on our cruise line that you and I worked for, they were pretty well behaved.
Yeah, because we never worked for Carnival.
No.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. No, but it's the truth. I mean, you see on social media every other day, there's some crazy fight breakout in the dining room or the pool deck of those bigger party cruises.
Right.
But no, I never had to break anything up. I mean, shouting matches every now and then, but nothing like physical altercations ever.
Over like the last waffle at the Lido.
Yeah. Yeah, it was dumb stuff. It was dumb shit.
What's the most dramatic thing you ever witnessed guests do?
There was a guest that walked into the hotel director's office and peed in the corner of the office. I shit you not.
What?
Yeah. That's another one. You asked me a question, I'll give you an answer right away. That one takes the cake. Yeah, don't know if it was dementia or alcohol. I couldn't tell you. He was an old dude, just walked in and dropped trout and just pissed in the corner of the hotel director's office.
That's
it's
quite
one of
a
those
day.
things where you don't even have a reaction because you're just like, this is not happening right now. So,
wow,
unseen stuff.
So we keep mentioning the hotel director, who's essentially our direct supervisor, and then captain is essentially over everything on the ship. How are those relationships? Did you ever have any run-ins or dramatic? Because sometimes those relationships are iffy, and that you just get someone who doesn't like you or seems to have it out for you, where you had a connection that you're just like, I can't wait to be done with this guy.
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, hotel directors, I never had a problem with any of them. In fact, I would say 99 out of 100 times we had a great relationship, really great. There was one early on, and I can't fault him for this, but this was when I was, super young. I was probably 24, 25. And he didn't really care for me only because I was not experienced. And, I can look back on that and be like, all right, fair, whatever. But but I'm literally, no exaggeration, probably one that didn't care for me. But I'll say it lightly like that. Like, he didn't hate me or anything, but most of them we got along, I mean, beautifully. The relationship with hotel directors was great. There was a captain, however, that did not like me. I'm convinced, and everyone that is looking in on the situation agrees with me, that I was a threat to him when it came to women. Because this was early on. I was 25 or 6, and I boarded his ship, and I'd heard about him, and he was known for, he was like 60, I think, 55, 60. He was known
Captain?
He was known for going after the young dancers. So, and when this is over, off record here, I want to see if you know who he is, because I don't think he's around anymore. But he would make sure that he had a couple on his arm when he walked into the dining room, or he walked into the showroom, or the steakhouse or whatever, and he pursued them all the time, constantly, contract after contract. But I guess, I don't know, when I stepped on board, I was a young single guy, cruise director, made a load of friends right away. Everything was great. And he just wasn't having it. He just didn't like me. And he tried to get me on a few things. It was a short contract. He tried to get me in trouble, tried to, I was walking on eggshells around him, and he's just, gave me the cold shoulder all the time. I tried to penetrate I tried to get on his good side, but it was a nasty situation. So he ended up being confronted by the corporate office, and within the same meeting had like a heart attack or something, because they were catching on to what he was doing, and he was getting himself into hot water when with pursuing some of these young women, and unwanted at times, and whatever the case is. So anyway, that was one that was the only senior level, management that I didn't get along with, and
Yeah.
rightfully so.
Wow. And then oftentimes you're working in parallel with an event manager to work on schedules together. Sometimes there's a power play of who's running the entertainment department. I had a mixed bag of how I felt about my event managers back and forth. But again, I think that's because I was so new and I watched the relationship of how clearly my training cruise director was the head of the department.
Yeah, you just feel it out, right? There's some that are capable of actually being the manager of the department, and there's some that are clearly not. And I just kind of, I felt it out. And if I felt that there was one that was really good, yeah, I'll let you run. I'll let you do your thing, because I knew the importance of my position, which was you get on stage and you deliver the message. Arguably the most important thing of the entire voyage is making sure that you have a good cruise director, because you could have a killer event manager, and if your cruise director sucks, you're in a world that's fucked.
Yep.
Because you're the front line. So I knew that I spent all my time and effort making sure that I did that part the best. And when I had an event manager that wasn't keeping up his or her end of the bargain in regards to the administrative side, then I would step into that role more if I needed to. But I got along with most of them because I kind of took that approach.
Yep. I don't know why. I just got in my mind like this image of a Ron Burgundy sludging around the cruise ship drunk, like, sure, good. Like there were some times that was me. And then the rest of the times I was freaking golden boy. But just funny at a certain point with the confidence that you get with your drink to think you can be Ron Burgundy type cruise director is no, it doesn't work here.
Yeah, I had only a couple times I had too many. I was like, you know what? Because you catch yourself, you'll slur something and be like, oh, it's time for me to go to bed.
Yeah. Some slurred announcements.
Yeah.
You got to go all over the world with your itinerary. What's one of the most remarkable things you saw, or the most beautiful, memorable moments of travel?
I get that's probably the most common question I get from friends and family, and there's really I can't pick one place. I always give everybody my top 3 favorite cities in the world, and that would be Barcelona, Sydney, Australia, and Buenos Aires. Those 3 really were amazing. Now, as far as landmarks, though, I will say there were a couple things that when I saw them, I was like, oh my God, I never thought I would see that. That is like seeing a mega celebrity. And those would be the pyramids. That was crazy. To drive up to that was insane. And then the Eiffel Tower was pretty badass too. That was surreal to drive up to that for the first time.
Did you ever run into any drama on land, like close calls getting back to the ship? Do you have a time?
Yeah, I was dating somebody and we went to the zoo in Melbourne, Australia. And you know how it is. Sometimes you just think you got a grasp on time and it slips away from you. And we got out of the zoo at the right time, but we were running, and then the train stopped for whatever, I don't know, reason. And the ship waited for a few minutes, which is usually a fireable offense too, by the way. But the captain had mercy on us that day. But a couple close calls missing the ship. But that was something I've always tried to pride myself on, being like colossally punctual. So that was something I rarely ran up against. I didn't fuck with the all aboard time.
Yeah. Oftentimes there's a lot of maritime law, and the weird things that you see out in the ocean are so random. What is one of the most random things you never thought you would experience out there that happened?
We were in Alaska, and it was pouring rain, and I was just sitting up in the restaurant, the casual, buffet, just eating, and I was staring out the window. I was literally dazing just in space, and in the exact spot I was looking, I saw my first whale breach, and that was something I thought they only CGI commercial movie. I'd never thought in a million years that I would be able to see something like that. That was pretty special. That's the only thing that I can think of that really impacted me that I saw, on the water or out at sea. Luckily, nothing crazy. No, rogue waves or any, weird things like that. But
like I heard, some tales of finding random people out on the ocean, and then maritime law where essentially the ship that catches them has to pull them aboard and stop and make rescue. And So some unique stories I've heard like that. What is, in all of your years doing this, if you look back, if you could change anything, something that you would do differently, knowing what you know now?
Wow. What would I do differently? You know what? I don't know if I would change anything. That's it. You might have to come back to me on that. I might have to give that more thought. But everything went so well. I got into the right amount of trouble. I never got into too much, but I approached everything the way I thought it should be approached. And that's a tough one. I think if I had to go back and do anything differently, I think the only thing I would do differently is I would spend more time shadowing and learning from all the different event managers that I worked with to just sharpen my skills on that side of the table, because
Mm-hmm.
I was a stage guy. I was an air attack. I was get on stage and knock that out of the park for a few minutes and then be able to go do my own thing and get on the PA and make sure I'm always clear and, witty at the right times and this, that, which our buddy in common that trained you could relate to as well. But I would say if I had to go back and do anything different, I would spend more time honing skills on the administrative side of the gig.
Yeah. If there were a confession booth on board and you had to go in and talk to the Father on the other side, what would you ask for forgiveness for in private?
I would say the way some of the quote unquote relationships went and some of the things I did, I learned some lessons that even anonymous, I don't even want to dive into. But I might have hurt a few people. So I'd ask for forgiveness on that.
You're so sweet, Casey. You are such a good guy. And so, like, the things that you're like, I don't know if I want to talk about that. It's like, it's so human the way that operates out there. It's such a bubble that even though you might think you could potentially have hurt some people along the way, it's a very human thing, the way stuff operates out there.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I really mean that too, because I don't really regret anything that I did to my own self. I fucked up a few times. Everyone does, but I'm okay with hurting myself because I learned from that. But I do know for a fact that along my journey, I made loads of friends, and I think that the majority of people I met, the vast majority, enjoyed me and I enjoyed them. But I do know for a fact there were a few people I hurt. So and I've tried to reach out to them and with no success, but that's what I'd ask forgiveness for. Yeah, for sure.
I did that in some quick AA talk here. Like a part of like a 12-step program is making amends. You make these lists of all the people you have harmed and how they've harmed you and letting it go and resentments. And I did have to reach out to an event manager or two and people on board to say, hey, really sorry for the way I left things from what I said. But that was so much more with my own addiction and stuff like that.
How was that received?
Received.
Gotcha.
Not necessarily like, no, don't worry about it. That's okay.
Right.
Like, no, you were a dick. So thanks. You know what I mean? It varies what you're going to get. You don't always get to have the outcome you want when you go seeking amends or forgiveness. All you're going to do is let it off your chest, off yourself. But
do everything you can do. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. The world out there, it's so different. It's beautiful. You feel connected to nature and to people that they come to you in such a place of longing for escape, longing for paradise, longing for a breath. So you get a lot of times people unfolded in conversations and things you're doing and saying, what are some of the most impactful guest experiences you had in conversations, things someone said to you or a difference someone made to you? Or like a spiritual experience? Did you feel connected to like a higher power or something unique out there?
Whenever you get somebody on board that just beat cancer or is celebrating the life of somebody they just lost, or I hated it when I heard my significant other and I had this cruise planned and they passed away, and I wanted to take the cruise because I wanted to feel connected to them still. Those are the moments where you stop and think, there's so much more to all this than the trivias and the shows and the dining and the this and the that. These people that are all herded together watching all of us do our thing, a lot of them have some incredible things that they're dealing with or doing in their life. And whenever you get a peek into that, whenever they're willing to share that, those are pretty unbelievable. And I can't, they're all impactful. I don't want to pinpoint one over the other, but those big life moments that people share with you are that it really makes it worth it. It makes it interesting.
Yeah. So cruise directors, like we've talked about, have such high stakes in what they do, and you're always on. You're the charismatic smile and keeping energy up. It's demanding. And so typically the contracts are shorter, and shorter being like 4 to 5 months rather than 8 or 9 months of trying to keep that pace up. How do you see like mental health wise, and how did you balance all that aspect of staying refreshed and on?
That's time management, and there's a good reason that they're only 3 or 4, like you said, instead of 8 or 9, because I did see cruise directors try to do that. I was friends with one that tried to do a full year. Not only did he end up stopping the job altogether, but he had to go get help after it was all over. He just took on too much. He bit off more than he could chew, and it ended up being a disaster. The money is good, and I think what happens is a lot of people say, well, I got to get out of this student loan debt. I got to get out of this debt. I got to make that happen. And they take on more than they can, and then it ends up being a problem because it's sensory overload on board, and you end up snapping. Like you said, you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders, and you got to stay on. And if you don't give yourself enough time to recuperate from 1 week or 1 month on to the next, then it takes a toll. I just made sure that I took the correct breaks, the correct amount of time, not just off the ship, but on board too. If you put in a certain amount of time, you need to make sure that you're behind closed doors and you can tune out to an episode of this or that, or a glass of this or that, or whatever the case is. But I always, and I had a mentor too that said, less is more. Do an awesome event for 1 hour as opposed to 4 shitty events that take up 4 hours. So I tried to make sure that my schedule reflected that quality over quantity more so than anything else, so that I could keep a fresh mind and everything I did.
Things you could not say to guests as a cruise director that you would like to say, that you wish guests would know or hear, consider?
The first thing that popped into my mind, though, I just such an advocate for the crew morale and the crew members. A lot of them were treated poorly just because someone shells out a certain amount of money for the vacation. They kind of think they can say whatever they want to the crew, and it's just an awful way to go about life. And I wish I could have said, and that maybe that's a bad example, because you could say that to a certain extent to a guest on board if something got out of hand, but just speak nicer to the crew in general. That's the first one. But it's such a funny question for a cruise director, because I was able to get out a lot of the things that I wanted to say in tricky ways, or ways that the guests wouldn't be able to pick up on.
Nice little humor jabs.
Yeah, there's power in humor. You can, when you make things sound like a joke, you can really get the message across. And I utilize that a lot in debark talks and things like that. But what's going to happen? I'm going to text you later when I think of how could I forget this?
Before we go, I do want to ask one of the most important questions. What does it take to have a good journey in this life?
It takes thick skin, an awesome sense of humor, and the knowing that everyone means well, even with everyone's differences. Everyone means well. They're just trying to do things the way that they were brought up. They're trying to navigate this crazy world the way that they were brought up, and as a product of their own environment. And just know that about everybody before you pass judgment. But if you can have a thick skin, a good sense of humor, and you're well aware that everyone's got baggage and differences, then I think everyone can do a really good job of relating to one another. And a cruise ship, funny enough, great tie-in, is proof of that.
Yeah. Great answer. What moves your heart more than anything about all of this, and having worked in the cruise line all these years?
Seeing everyone, not just guests, but also crew, come together and working in an entertainment environment or a vacation environment. For a living, I get to be a part of the fun part of someone else's life. I'm not a part of the cubicle part of someone's life. I'm not a part of the office part of someone's life. I'm not a part of a sad, medical environment, or I get to be the part of someone's life where they say goodbye to the baggage and they get to come forget about it. And it's up to me. Holy cow. Are you kidding? It's up to me to make sure that goes well. It's a huge challenge, but it's a fun one. I don't regret anything about passing up opportunities with business school or this or that. The fact that I accidentally landed in the travel and leisure world I wouldn't want to spend my life doing anything else.
I think you landed in the right spot. And I can just sense from time with you, and again, the things that I heard about you when I went asking for resources or reference of like, who do I need to talk to? And they're like, you need to talk to Casey. It just like, he's such a stand-up guy. Got such fun stories. So thanks for being you. And I'm sure the way you impact the crew and guests alike that you're out there with, you're a stand-up guy. And this is a great place for you to be, and more success than you could possibly know in the way that you've impacted people.
Well, thank you so much. Pleasure being on this podcast with you.
Yeah. So be sure to text me if you think of any of those answers. But again, thanks so much for sharing your stories and everything you have with us here today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of our Wild Stories at Sea. If you have any crazy endeavors out on the Big Blue, email me at cruisedirectortyler@gmail.com. That's cruisedirectortyler@gmail.com. We would love to hear your stories either on board or from the crew bar. And that's it for this port of call. Join us as we sail on to the next wave of outlandish stories on Shipfaced, Confessions of a Drunken Cruise Director and Friends. A quick disclaimer, while this podcast is based on the experiences of me and my guests, certain details may have been modified, and for privacy purposes, names of all parties may have been changed. The views and opinions expressed here are mine and my guests, and not that of any brand I may be affiliated with. Yes. Stop recording.